Hi, and welcome to another episode of Hot Takes with me, the Silver Fox. As each day passes, we get one day closer to the next general election, whenever it shall be. And every few days or week or so, there is a new poll published, and they all have one thing in common. It's curtains for the SNP. Every time there's a poll published, it goes to show that the SNP are becoming ever more unpopular. And there seems to be no real uptick. Now, the poll that was published today has no different. It's actually slightly better than the last poll, but not by much, and it still puts the SNP in a terrible position. But this also shows some other things. The majority of Scots, for example, want the Butte House agreement with the Greens to be dissolved. Humza Yousaf's personal rating is terrible, and it isn't looking good for seats. Oh dear, what a shame. Let me cry some tears. But we'll take a look at it, because it is always, I think, amusing to see the SNP at the back end of any kind of poll, given that they have been so dominant over 17 years, although we know now that that dominance has been at the cost of human misery and the wealth of the nation. They are quite simply going bankrupt, paying for their power. Or rather, you are paying for their power. Let's have a look to see what's going on. Here goes. Triple whammy for Humza Yousaf, as poll shows the SNP will lose 25 seats at the general election. The last poll said 30, so it may look like a slight increase for the SNP, but these things do wobble along. But even so, it's still appallingly bad, and a defeat like that will undoubtedly mean that Humza Yousaf will be forced to resign. This isn't just losing one or two seats, it's losing nearly half of them, showing what a complete failure he is. But it's worse than that for him, because his own personal rating is through the toilet. And I will point out that the very fact that this is being published today means that this survey must have been taken before Nicola Sturgeon sat there giving an Oscar-winning performance at the COVID inquiry. That too, I think, will undoubtedly cost them more public opinion, more votes, more seats. And it'll be interesting to see what the next poll shows. But we'll have a look at this one, because it is humiliating for him, which is always good. We do like to see Humza Yousaf humiliated, because he deserves it so much, doesn't he? Anyway, Humza Yousaf has been handed the triple whammy of blows in a new poll, which suggests his party will lose 25 seats at the general election. That would put the SNP level with Scottish Labour, effectively destroying his de facto referendum plan to try and push for the breakup of the UK, had the Nats won a majority of seats. Of course, it would never have done anything. Doesn't matter how many seats they win. You go, no, we've got the majority of seats. We've called it a de facto referendum. And the UK government go, yeah, that's nice, dear. Pat him on the head and send him on his way and do nothing. Under no obligation to do anything. It's not a real referendum. And you go, I want to talk about it. And they'll say, yeah, okay, let's have a talk. Do you want to have independence? Yes. Well, you're not having it. Now off you go. That's it. That's as far as it would go. But to not even get to that point, to not even get enough votes that he could even claim that would be the ultimate humiliation for him. How very sad. And of course, that's only based on the numbers. A bit of tactical voting here, guys. Boom, you can destroy more. But of course, that's actually only favourable there. The last poll we saw, it was 30 seats lost. And that's before, as I say, Nicola Sturgeon's evidence. That will undoubtedly damage them even further. It's becoming ever more apparent how awful she is and the things she'd done. Anyway, the survey also delivered a withering verdict on his own leadership, with less than a quarter of voters having a favourable opinion of him. Which must mean, because given the number of people who vote SNP, that an awful lot of SNP voters don't think much of Humza Yousaf. And for sure, a lot of SNP politicians don't think much of Humza Yousaf. They're looking at their seats and thinking, am I going to have a job? And the answer is probably not. To complete the hat-trick, a majority of Scots want the First Minister to ditch the Butte House agreement with the Scottish Greens. But he can't do that. He has tied himself to the mast of the Greens. He's so closely aligned himself with the Greens. There's been excuses. There's been times when he could have saved face and got rid of the Greens without humiliation. We're going, well, you know, this has changed. I think the time has come, blah, blah, blah. And he could have done it. And he'd have been fine, and people would have we completely understand, that's fine, and moved on. And he chose not to. He chose to keep that alliance. Now, either he's a very, very scared, weak man who realises that running a minority government is hard, or he's just embarrassed about going back on something. Either way, it's not good, is it? It's not good for the country. It's not good for him. And he does always look like he's about to burst into tears, doesn't he? The Scotland-wide poll, which was conducted by Survation for advisory firm True North and polled 1,029 voters, put the Nats just ahead of Labour in the popular vote ahead of the election, likely to take place in the autumn. 36% would vote SNP, according to 34% opting for Labour, which seems likely to be a big win, a big majority across the UK. Labour, of course, most likely, short of an absolute miracle, to form the next government. And then Keir Starmer would move into number 10, but people will be telling him don't bother to unpack, because as soon as he gets in, there'll be a little coup d'etat, and Angela Rayner will become the Prime Minister. God help us, a woman who left school and couldn't read. The Conservatives and the Lib Dems could expect to pick up 16% and 8% of the vote, respectively. Analysis by polling expert Professor Sir John Curtis predicts the SNP and Labour would win 23 seats each, based on the new boundaries. The SNP won 48 in 2019, although there are fewer seats up for grabs this time. Shrunken by a couple, haven't they, because of the boundary changes, which, strangely enough, have always previously benefited Labour. Slightly less so now, but if Labour still get them. But as time goes on, I think these numbers will harden, and I think Labour will get the majority of seats in Scotland. I genuinely do, because I think as time goes on, people are seeing into the SNP. They're seeing what the SNP is. Now, obviously, you're going to get your raging loons will constantly go with them, but the more normal people, the more people that are more centrist, who are sort of pro-indie but not necessarily tied to the SNP, will perhaps abandon them, which would be a good thing. Go to Alaba, vote for him. Anyway, the SNP, we've just done that. Sorry, if the poll is correct, the Tories would defy expectations and hold on to 6 seats, while the Lib Dems would win 5. I think Conservatives in Scotland will probably fare slightly better than Conservatives in England, to put it fair. In terms of Skexit, the poll showed 52% would back the union, 48% wanting to leave once the don't knows are removed. And around 18% of Scots who back independence are predicted to vote Labour. So nearly 1 in 5 pro-indie Scots voting Labour. That alone should be sending the alarm bells through the SNP saying we must get rid of Humza Yousaf. It's the only way. The poll suggested that the tactics employed by Humza Yousaf to rid Scotland of the Tories or Anna Sawal's appeal to SNP voters were not having much of an impact, with few voters being persuaded, and even then both appeals cancelling each other out. Professor Curtis said the poll showed there was still work for both parties. The SNP and Labour remain locked in a close contest for supremacy in Scotland at the next Westminster election. Humza Yousaf has got so little personal charm, he can't actually pull voters in by being nice and look at me and I'm the caring one. Because people see, first of all, they see a wishy-washy, empty-minded fool who is racist, anti-white, doesn't really like Scotland, wants to change it, wants to destroy it. And on the other hand, you've got Anna Sawar, who has kept his powder dry. He doesn't say anything, he keeps quiet. Nobody knows anything about him. This is the thing. And when anything needs doing, out comes Jackie Baillie. Jackie Baillie should be the leader of the Labour Party, I feel. Should do a far better job. Certainly more charismatic. But the thing is, and that's where Anna Sawar's played the blinder, of course. He hasn't said anything. So he hasn't said anything controversial. He hasn't put his foot in it. It's not Anna Sawar going and courting world leaders. It's not Anna Sawar, sucking up to people who kill people, like Erdogan. Anna Sawar sits back. He just goes, let them come to me. And they are. Play the blinder, Anna. Anyway, despite there being no sign of any erosion for support for independence, the SNP are having to deal with the backdrop of a relatively unpopular leader and a record in government which many of their supporters are unhappy. Yet it looks as though the cry to vote Labour to help kick the Tories out may not be enough to propel Sir Keir Starmer's party into a decisive lead north of the border, and both parties still have a lot of campaigning to do. It's going to be close. We've always known it's going to be close. But what's the astounding thing isn't going to be the closeness of the result. It's the fact that Labour have gone from 1 seat to maybe 25, according to some polls, 30 seats. That's remarkable. And of course, it's the fall in support for the SNP. And that, of course, has got to benefit everyone. So there we go. Mr. Loser will be losing, and they're just wanting the election to come as quickly as possible now. Anyway, coming up. When the leader of the country says he hates 98% of the country because they're white, when the leader of that country, which is a nominally Christian country, gives out all the foreign aid, millions of pounds of foreign aid, and gives it exclusively to Muslim nations, when the leader of that country sucks up to people who might end up in the Hague for war crimes and crimes against humanity, all these things add up, and they're all embodied in one person, Humza Yousaf, a man who absolutely loathes Scotland. Why else would he do these things? Why else would he bankrupt Scotland? Why else would he push policies that damage jobs, that damage opportunities, that damage investment, that damage education, that damage the future of the entire country? He looks at all the strengths, the oil and gas industry, the whiskey industry, the farming industry, and the fishing industry, and he enacts policies designed to destroy all of them. The man is an enemy of the people. Thank you for watching. Do please hit the button, hit the other button, hit all the buttons, but definitely subscribe. Ring the bell, leave a like, leave a comment. Please share the video, and until next time, stay safe, stay well, and I will speak to you later. Bye.